we've got Sankara on the line with us already, which we're really pleased. So we're going to kick off with Sankara and hope that our other speaker joins us soon. Sankara is the Executive Director of Akili Dada, which is an organisation that seeks to nurture transformative leadership in girls and young women. She's a Pan-Africanist who is passionate about women and girls' leadership, education and social change. Sankara has a really interesting background, which I've obviously been reading into, and I'd recommend anyone after this call goes and has a look at Akili Dada's website, and we'll share the link in the chat box at some point so you're aware of the work. And so I'm going to hand over, I think, to Sankara first of all, just to begin. We're going to run the format in each of our speakers talks and kind of sets out their stall and talks about the issues they think are most important. I'll then get them to reflect possibly on each other's talks if they arrive on time, and if they don't, I'll do some reflections and then we'll open up the floor to questions. But please do just drop them in as you go along, because I'll be fielding them as I can. But just before we start, I've just been reminded that we do need to run the first poll. And then I'm going to get Sankara to start talking. So we've just started a new piece of work through the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, UKA Direct, which is organising peer learning amongst our groups in Wales. And we're really interested to hear about the issues that people want to get involved in working groups and how people would be able to participate in those groups. I'm going to ask my colleague Emma to launch the poll, and if you could just take a few minutes to respond to it. We've run this poll at all of our sessions. So if you've already filled in, please don't feel like you need to fill it in again. It's probably getting a bit boring for a few people. I've seen some really well-attended people on our Zoom calls recently. If you haven't participated yet, please do. We'll also run a poll at the end just to check whether you've had any interesting moments of learning, and how we've done and how we should move forward. So thank you. I'm going to leave that up for around a minute. I know it's a bit fiddly sometimes to complete these polls online, especially if people are on kind of tablets or mobile phones. So I'll just give it a second or two more. I've also seen in the meantime a few more people have just joined the call as well, which is nice. For those that have just joined, please feel free to participate in the chat box with questions, but we ask that people are only kind and respectful in those chat boxes. We won't tolerate any any abuse. Okay, I'm going to leave this to run for just another 15 seconds or so. Okay, just gonna end that poll in a few seconds when we get to 2 minutes. Okay, Emma, if you could end that poll and we can kick off the session properly. Thank you. Sankara, thank you for joining us today. We're really looking forward to hearing more from you. So if you just want to begin.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you for having us. I am Sankara Caroline. I work with Akili Dada as the Executive Director. Akili Dada is based in Nairobi, Kenya, and the work that we do primarily focus on the Global South and mostly the Southern African parts of the country, of the continent as well. So Akili Dada is a leadership incubator. What we do is we find young women and girls in different spaces. This would ideally be in schools or in colleges, stroke universities, and even at the workplace. Our model, or rather our theory of change, we believe that if you invest in a girl and give her access to the opportunities and also give her access to the resources that she requires, then she's well able to really experience life in a different way, and more importantly, rise into leadership positions. Our vision is to make sure that we have a lot more women in leadership positions. So at Akili Dada, we engage a couple of ways and a couple of interventions and a couple of innovations, and I'll take you through them one by one. So one of the things that we do is education. We focus on is education to access. How we do this is through provision of scholarships. A majority of the brilliant girls who are coming from underserved spaces in Kenya particularly, their parents or their households would ideally not be able to sustain them in school. This is because the household budget is usually quite distributed, rather quite divided. So school fees then becomes something that is a by the way. So we offer scholarships to young, brilliant girls who are in high school. This is ages about 13 to 18, and mostly 13 to 18. And in some cases, for example, at the coastal side of Kenya, you'd even have young women going to school between ages of 19 to 25. This is because there's a lot of delayed articulation of grades within those spaces. The other thing that we do around education and how we increase access to education is by ensuring that the schools are actually equipped with resources. And the resources that we equip the schools with would usually be soft skills. A majority of the time that our young girls are spending in schools, they're spending their times with the teachers. And the teachers are then the guardians stroke the gatekeepers. So we want to make sure that the teachers know how to deal or how to approach mental health. We want to make sure that the teachers are able to really support the young girls as far as the psychosocial support is concerned, and also be able to call out issues when they see issues happening. A good example is the issue of gender-based violence. A majority of the time when gender-based violence is happening at home, it does affect the young girls. But you would not really be able to know that if you haven't lived that type of experience. So what we do is we make sure that the teachers stroke the guardians in school are able to hold these conversations with the young girls within that safe space that is the schools. The next thing that we do is leadership. So we do a lot of leadership training, and our leadership training is focused in universities. This is because a majority of the time, people who are already thinking about leadership would ideally be in universities, and these are the people who are getting into the new world of work. This is where you want to begin to teach issues of feminism. This is where you want to start introducing concepts such as social justice, gender equality, etc., etc. And how we do that is we go through the university leadership. So we have agreements and partnerships with the national universities in Kenya and even private universities. And we go into schools to do trainings. And our trainings would ideally be about 4 trainings every semester. That was before COVID. Now that we are primarily living in a fully virtual world, we are doing our trainings virtually. We are also creating groups within a space that is WhatsApp, where the young women can be able to share and exchange ideas and also exchange their own experiences right now, because these universities they're not in one location in Kenya. So the universities are in different spaces to just make sure that women are learning from each other, because in a lot of the studies that we've conducted, we have actually established a lot of peer-to-peer mentoring, peer-to-peer exchange of information, and also just peer-to-peer coaching. The other thing that we do with universities is we do conduct a lot of studies, and we do work with the universities to do that. Last year, we conducted 3 studies, and these studies are available on our website. One of the studies we conducted was on gender-based violence in universities. The other study we conducted was on African feminist mentorship principles, what that looks like, what it looks like to become a mentor, to become a mentee. What about also that relationship? How can we make sure that we're also entrenching a lot of African feminist practices that existed way beyond, the Western influences on the concept of mentorship for Africa? The third study we also conducted was on teen pregnancy. So Kenya is Kenya is not necessarily is a third world country. We're in Africa, but then a lot of the things that happen in Kenya are actually very, very progressive. So as a progressive country, one of the things that we have been able to have and have in plenty is a lot of policies. We do have a lot of policies. For example, the education policy in Kenya, we have free primary education, we have part free secondary education, and it is very easy for young girls to access university. And I know when I say we have free secondary education, then the question is, then why are you giving scholarships in secondary schools? But the government doesn't cater for the school fees at 100%. So government only caters to about, it should be about 70%. So things like tuition, that's what the government takes care of. But then there are other things that would ideally be required to run an institution, or rather an academic institution, that government doesn't cater for. And that's what we cater for. Then the other thing that we also did around the teen pregnancy, rather something else that we have also realized within the schools we work in, is that young girls tend to fall out of school because of teen pregnancy. And these teen pregnancies are not necessarily caused by people outside of the school. It's not necessarily people who are older than the girls. Sometimes it's their fellow classmates or people that are within the same age group. So we have been studying that, and we have some numbers. So if you want to see that report, it's on the website. If you have any clarifying questions, please do feel free to reach out to us. The other thing that we do is mentorship. How we do our mentorship is we make sure that we are pairing young women with women who are not so young. So this is, for example, high school going women with women who are in the world of work, but are still quite young. When we do that, what we found is that younger women are well able to relate to what is going on within their different spaces. Their own lived experiences are able to be relatable for women who are in other spaces that are bigger, whether it's in, mid-level management or even senior level management, not necessarily in, like, say, the Deloittes or, big organizations, but in organizations that do have a lot of impact in communities. And we've seen this to, we've seen this to become something that is very, very critical in how the young women continue to, say, project the trajectory of their own lives. The overarching theme we have is a feminist theme. So we are a feminist organization. And one of the things that we really do cater to is gender and social justice. Gender equality is a matter of social justice, and we believe in that, period. A lot of the young women that we work with, the young girls that we work with, what we teach through our curriculums, through our manuals, through our group setups, the Akili Dada clubs that we have both in high school and also in the university spaces, and also the feminist movement that we continue to build, is very social justice based. We believe in access to education. We believe in access to employment. We do not believe that, young women are set up to lead the photocopying department. We want young women in spaces where they can make decisions, We want them in spaces where they can influence and impact policy, amongst other different things that we do. And so that's what Akili Dada does. And I'll move it back to you, Claire. I see Adwoa has joined us.
Adwoa has joined us. We're very glad to have her on the call as well. So I'm going to actually, Sankara, I'm going to head straight to Adwoa and just introduce her briefly, and then we can come back and reflect on both what you've both said together. Adwoa, thank you for joining us. Pleased to see you.
Thank you. I had a few technical challenges.
Don't we all? Isn't that just life these days? Like, I don't think I've ever joined a call where I haven't had some kind of mild panic at the beginning of it. So
mild?
Yeah. So I'm just going to introduce Adwoa. She works for an organisation called Forward, which is an acronym for Foundation for Women's Health Research and Development. Adwoa is that would be giving away my job now. Is head of global advocacy and partnerships for the organisation. She's also got a remarkable background and holds several jobs and positions from what I can make out through reading your bio, but they're all jobs and positions that allow you to kind of realise your aims of securing equal rights and justice for African girls and women. So thank you for joining us today. And Sankara's just talked through her organisation and the kind of programmes that they do to kind of help girls into leadership positions. I'm going to ask you to do the same, if you don't mind, if you can catch your breath having joined the call, and just give us 5 to 10 minutes on the work of your organisation and gender justice.
I caught the tail end. Good morning, everybody, and apologies for being late. I caught the tail end of Sankara's presentation, and I thought she's saying exactly what I want to say. But let me start with the history of Forward. We are the leading African women-led international development organization in the UK, committed to safeguarding the dignity and rights of African women and girls. We were established, registered in 1985, working specifically at that time on female genital mutilation. Our founder, Adwoa Dokenu, had come across it in her work as a midwife, and it had generated an interest and almost a moral responsibility for us as African women to talk about these issues that affect ourselves. So we started working mainly on FGM, but we quickly realized, and it's one of the learnings that has taken forward as it were, that we couldn't deal with female genital mutilation in isolation. That in a lot of our communities, female genital mutilation is a direct precursor to child marriage, which is a direct precursor to child motherhood, which is a direct precursor to challenges with obstetric complications like obstetric fistula, rectovaginal fistula, particularly in our African developing communities. So that is one of the learnings that Forward has taken. Now, when you start with one issue, you are never able to only work on that issue. You've got to deal at all the other intersectionalities that go with that issue. So since then, Forward has been working and growing and looking at the country context in which we work, adding the other issues of gender justice. So we are partnering with Akili Dada. We've just started a project with Akili Dada on young women's leadership. And that is the direction that Forward has decided is important for us if we want to see sustained change, if we want to see gender justice. We've got to focus on building the capacity of young women, getting those young women into leadership spaces so that we can influence and create the sustained change that is necessary to actually achieve the justice we want to see. Forward works in an interlocked way. We believe that we can't work only targeting African communities or communities where traditionally FGM, child marriage, child motherhood occur. We've got to work in the UK because the UK communities influence communities at home, and communities at home influence the UK situation. We also recognize that it is critical that we work with all the stakeholders that are involved in the issues we are dealing with, which means we've got to work not only with women and girls, although we work primarily with women and girls, but we've got to work with men and boys, with faith and opinion leaders, and with parents to ensure that that change is sustained. You've got to start at the community level, embed it in. But at the community level, you even have to start at the family level. Because if you want to make changes in social norms, it's almost change, one person at a time. Because all of these practices are entrenched gender norms. And to deal with gender norms takes a lot of time and a lot of person power. And in the case of Akili Dada and ourselves, woman power, because it's mainly women working at that level to make those changes. We've also learned over the years that as I said before, the intersectionalities that we need to take into consideration when we are trying to change social norms are critical, because it's impossible to just change one element and forget all the other elements that have an influence on it. So Forward works in the UK training professionals. We work in schools because we believe that it's important we reach out to young girls and boys very early. We work with young women, as we do with Sankara, young women into leadership. And our Tuwezeshe Akili Dada project has been the culmination of years of working on and devising a bespoke young women's leadership project. And it's important for us to work with the diaspora, all the diaspora, to make sure that we are able to make those changes and sustain those changes. I suppose I can stop here and see if anybody has any questions, or Claire has any questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to start with some of the kind of reflections and things we're talking about. Something that has come up in a couple of the calls that we've done so far this week on obviously kind of massive issues pertaining to like sustainability and climate change, and the intersection of how women negatively affected through climate change and those systems as well. And similarly, yesterday we were talking about kind of sustainability and ceding more power to local groups, because change happens at a local level more easily than it happens at a kind of systemic level. I'm really interested to hear from both of you about making incremental changes in communities, and also what can happen to kind of make big systems change. I know everyone feels really despondent at times. I think it's really difficult, isn't it, to kind of look at the slow pace of change for women across the world, and wanting to be able to do something kind of practical in your daily life to kind of drive that change. And I was just wondering if either of you had any kind of reflections on the incremental versus the system, and how to kind of stay motivated, I think, as well. I'd be interested if you both feel positive in your work.
Yes, I think it's difficult. I think anything that has to do with social norm change, anything that has to do with challenging patriarchy, especially where patriarchy is so entrenched as it is in a lot of our communities, is very difficult. It is also challenging because a lot of funders, because we work with support from trust foundations, individual people, but a lot of the big funders want rapid change. And as Claire said, they want to, let's upscale, let's get the huge numbers. But social norm change doesn't work like that. As I've said before, it's about trying to deconstruct years of patriarchy, years of indoctrination almost. And that takes time. You won't see social norm change in 3 years. It's just not realistic. And when we're talking about practices like for forward, female genital mutilation, child marriage, it's not going to be a 3-year thing going to the communities and saying, this is not a good thing, stop it. It's about really looking at what underpins that and taking the time to really peel, almost like peeling back the layers of an onion and get to the real core of the matter. But I have to say, there have been positive changes, and that's what keeps us going. And I use this as an example. We're in Somalia, where, and I'm using the whole of Somalia, including Somaliland as one, where female genital mutilation has been entrenched for millennia, where patriarchy is so deep, where we did a Tuwezeshe program with 21 young women. And those 21 young women have made a seed change in the political campaigns of Somaliland. The last elections, every single candidate, all male, I have to say, took a political stand against FDS as part of their campaign. They haven't done much since they came into power, but at least they spoke about it. And it was out there, and it was being discussed publicly, something that was taboo, something that, men and women didn't talk about in the same spaces, something that was not public. Our 21 fellows were there creating that change on the ground to the point where they are now being used by UNFPA as spokespersons, young women leaders leading the change on FGM. So yes, there is a positive change, but we need to know that we are in it for the long haul. This is not something that's going to happen just like that. I mean, you can see I've gone grey campaigning, and I probably will have Sankara going grey campaigning. But then, if we are honest, so we are still campaigning in the UK. Look at the issues around last weekend, Clapham Common. We are still talking about violence against women and girls. So it's a long-term issue. And I think we've got to take the positives where we can. And we've got to build on that, and we can't stop. And I know Sankara won't stop.
No, I won't stop. You're right. You're very right, Adwoa. So I agree with everything that you've said. And to just add on quite briefly, you know, as Adwoa has said, patriarchy took a very long time to build. So we cannot, we cannot crash it or smash it or take it down in even a year or even 10 years. You know, it's interesting, you know, when you said when the year when Forward was founded, I shrunk inside. I was like, oh my God, I was just getting born. So I cannot imagine.
We're handing over soon.
I know. But then, so one of the things that we know and have realized as Akili Dada is that behavioral change takes a very long time to even measure. You know, in between giving trainings on what patriarchy is and why it should not continue to be funded or even continue to exist, all the way to having a group of people who are now feminists or a group of people who are not patriarchs anymore. It takes a very long time to change. And that's one of the reasons why this is taking so long. The other question on systemic change, you know, versus incremental change, we believe in incremental change. Yeah, we believe that you'd rather build up little by little over time as opposed to wanting to face the system, because the truth is that the system is highly resourced and the system is brutal. The system is nasty. Yeah, the system wants to take down. So the system is always going to have resources to build up something that is even much more big and more oppressive. So in how we do our incremental change is in making sure that in all aspects of humanity, from the child to the younger child, to the adolescent, to the guardian, to the parent, to the grandchildren, and so to the grandparents and the grandchildren, we make sure that we have a lot of intergenerational dialogues. Because when you do that, you're educating every single component of society, as opposed to saying we are only going to work with people of this age group. Because if you're only working with people of a particular age group, then you really have to create a world for them to come and live after the lessons they've learned, isn't it? Because in the true world, you have every single person in there. You have a mix of everybody. You have people who are closeted feminists, you know, you have people who are closeted patriarchs. And when you meet these people in the spaces where policy is being made, when you meet these people in spaces where implementation is happening for the greater good of generations or even of the people, those people become huge, huge barriers. The other thing that we have realized is that through education, really, you can impart different types and all types of knowledge. So the best places to find people is where they are willing to go and find an education, whether it's in a training center, whether it's in a leadership center, or in a high school, or in a primary school, or even just within the community setups that we have in Africa that we call the barazas. These would I think loosely translate to like town hall meetings and things like that. So in these spaces, when you go in there and make sure that how you're doing this education dissemination is inclusive, you are definitely going to gain some ground on whatever issue that you're looking to discuss within the space of whether it's gender justice, social justice, global justice, etc., etc. The other thing that we have found is that data is very important. If you do not have data, you cannot really begin to dissect or even address an issue, because you really do need to know what does the context of that environment look like. In Kenya, for example, the coastal spaces and a little bit of the northern parts of Kenya are very, very, what do we call it? They like to keep to themselves. they're very traditional, they're conservative is the word I was looking for. They're very conservative. So then that means that when you're trying to go into those spaces with new ideologies, such as end FGM, for them, they believe that's their culture. They have no way to, they cannot see a nexus between medical and traditional and contemporary. So they have no way to understand that. So if you're not doing your programs using data so that you know exactly where to come in, and also understand that you really have to have a good gender-centeredness in everything that you do, then ultimately you're setting yourself up for failure. So in order to do all these things, I personally believe that incremental change is better than systemic change. Yeah, just as Adwoa has said, with the presidential candidates we saw in Somalia, they all talked about FGM because they know that's the, that's the verse on the table. Yeah, so everybody wants to know, are you going to end this? And then you come into power, then that kind of becomes something that just took you there, which is something we have seen happen a lot of times, whether it's with jobs, whether it's access to education, whether it's access to good health, proper health, affordable healthcare, etc., etc. So those are my really not so few sentiments. But yeah, thank you for that question. That was a good question.
Let me build on what Sankara said. But at the same time, it's important to challenge where policies and legislation oppress women. So for example, one of the issues that comes about a lot is girls who get pregnant in school, who are then excluded from returning to mainstream formal education. And you find this re-entry policy very negative in some countries. In some countries, it's very, very clear. You cannot go back to school once you are a child mother, because you will, and I use this in inverted commas, you will spoil the other girls. And that condemns not only the girl, but the child and the future to a cycle of poverty. Because without education, how is she going to earn to look after the child? So we are condemning our countries, our nations, and our communities to non-development or to patriarchal development. So definitely we want to challenge legislations and policies like that, because those policies need to be overturned. Sorry, I have to jump in there.
No, it's fine. I think the point you made just then was quite eye-opening, actually, because I don't know if we have that kind of common saying, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And if you're excluding mothers from education at a point where they could be role modeling for the children coming behind them, it seems so obvious, doesn't it? But yet the kind of the view that you're going to spoil the other girls is the dominant one, even though it doesn't seem logical. It's
very illogical. I mean, it's something that Forward has been working on in Sierra Leone with our partners in Sierra Leone and with our partners in Tanzania, because Forward always works in partnerships with organizations on the ground. We don't believe in sort of going in with that sort of very power over approach, because partners on the ground have expertise, they have knowledge, they have the lived experience, they have the connections, and they will be there after the project is over. And that is what builds sustainability, and that is what will build change.
I'm going to move the questions on slightly. I'm quite excited because there's someone called Liza in the chat, and Becky Ricketts. I used to work for National Union of Students, organising students in Wales, and a couple of them have joined the call today, which is a bit unusual for us. We tend to stay in the kind of global development space. I'm glad to see some young women leaders join us today as well. So I'm sure they've been, you're the draw for them to join in. And they're both commenting that they're really interested in linking women in leadership positions in universities and colleges. And both of them have kind of similar sentiments about better encouraging female leadership and how to break stigmas. And both seem quite excited about opportunities to partner between universities in Wales and learning a bit from the leadership and mentoring programs you're leading. I think in particular you, Sankara, you talked about that. Can you talk a little bit more about that kind of higher education space that you kind of alluded to at the beginning when you were saying about older women mentoring younger women and those kind of dynamics. I'm sure they'd be interested to hear a bit more about it.
Okay, all right. So how Akili Dada started out as a scholarship fund. And all we were doing was finding young girls who were brilliant and then giving them scholarships. Then slowly over time, as we continue to go into schools, we learned that these girls actually lack a sense of direction. So in as much as you're paying school fees, the girl is only able to retain and have access to academic education. But then we have these other entire vast, parts of their lives that are not catered to. This is because, for example, if you're coming from a community that is underserved, your parents are only hustling, yeah? It's always food and shelter, food and shelter, food and shelter. So a majority of the life skills that you require have never been modeled to you. You've never seen that. So all you know is a life of just the struggle. And then because of that, you want an easy way out. So when we ask you to stay in school for 4 years and then go for another 4 years in university, you think it's gonna take me about 8 years. And even after I graduate from university, I'm not assured of a job. So then they were now quickly going into early marriages. They were quickly going into early pregnancies and things like that to just kind of stay away from, that long, although a bit promised trajectory of a better life or a better future. So then we started out our mentorship program on the basis of that. And what we were keen to do is to make sure that, one, we do calls for mentors. And the calls for mentors are advertised on our social media and our website, and people apply. And when people apply, people will apply and say, this is my story, this is where I'm coming from, this is what younger women would be able to leverage from my experience. And once they have done that, already we have a list of a lot of young girls who require mentorship, a lot of young girls who are in our alumni association, and a lot of girls who we're also continuing to keep talking to and keep engaging with, because we program in high schools. And all the girls going to a particular high school become our sort of alums because they get to join our Akili Dada clubs. So then that means that we will always have a database of a lot of young girls. We do not believe in that, like young girls not requiring a mentor. Everybody requires a mentor. Even I do. Adwoa, I believe you require a mentor, even with your gray hair. Yeah, So one of the things that we're very careful to do is to make sure that for girls who come to us and tell us, I want to become, say, a doctor, or I want to lead an organization. I want to found my own organization of an NGO, because in my community, we have this challenge where young girls are getting married, or young girls are just dropping out school to go for religious studies instead, or young girls are even dropping out of school to go engage in other types of vices. So then we pair that girl with somebody who has already been there and done that and is still young. So then this person is relatable. So the relationship that they end up having and the conversations they end up having are not prescriptive, So this girl is not being told, oh, no, you have to stay in school, or you have to finish school, or you cannot get pregnant, or we cannot even talk about contraceptive, like you have no business engaging in sex. So we make sure we do not have those type of people mentoring young girls, because then once we shut it and you create a wall, girls will not come to you. Then the other thing that we do is we make sure that our mentors are also assessed. And we assess them through a criteria that we have as an organization at Akili Dada. This is because we also want to know the type of people that we are giving access to and the type of people that are going to be shaping the trajectory of these young girls. Again, remember, the social context for Kenya is very different from that of Wales, even from that of Somalia. So most of the time, in as much as the girls are in school and the head teachers, et cetera, are guardians, we have a responsibility as an organization. And even before we go into schools, we have to get permissions from the government, through the Ministry of Education. So they have to know we are going into schools. These are the curriculums we are going to be using. Here's a mentoring toolkit that we're using. Here's a mentorship curriculum we're using. And this is what we are teaching, because they do want to know that. But you'll be surprised, because when we go to school, in as much as we are going in with the theme of we want a lot of young girls in leadership, we go in there and the first question that the girl asks you is, there's this boy I like, what do you think I should do? So then, the script has been flipped and we have to address it, because the truth is, once these girls are not with the parents, they are with the peers. And there's always going to be a girl who has a boyfriend. There's always going to be a girl who has already engaged in sex. There's always going to be a girl who watches things or Googles things and knows a few things. So the level of miseducation that you find in that particular group, of even just 3 BFFs, is always amazing to just see and experience. So we make sure that these mentors are young people, so they're able to have conversations. The women in universities are then paired with mentors, but then we do it in group sessions. Because in university, you're dealing with quite a lot of challenges. The ball game is very different there, because you're either dealing with self-esteem issues, you're either dealing with imposter syndrome, or you're dealing sometimes even with a lot of hurt and trauma, because it's most times in universities where people start to realize, oh, actually, I think I do have an issue. I think my upbringing was wrong. So when we put them in groups, then we allow for them to understand that their issue is an issue that someone else is going through. Then when they do require, like individual mentorship or individual therapy, we now move that from there and cater to that separately. So we allow them to have a safe space and allow them to share. The mentors who go into universities are usually very, very experienced mentors. Some of them are even coaches, and they are not only life coaches, but then they're also professional stroke career coaches. And we have like a system of how we do that. But the one thing we've really learned in universities is that learning how to address women in universities is very critical, because the relationship there is very voluntary. Young women can show up for a meeting and decide I won't go there anymore. And there's another one who's going to show up and still kind of stay to assess whether this is worth it or not. Then we have those who want to stay because they believe in the cause, they're feminists, they believe, they want to end whether it is, bad policies in universities, which is like one thing we have been able to do. We are now co-drafting the gender policies for 3 main universities in Kenya that participated in our study. And that is amazing, because that's how you begin to connect the development world and the academic world. And to see even academia be very open to say, we just thought this thing was just about gender. Like, what is the problem? These people are old, they have boyfriends, they are school wives and things like that. And you think, oh my goodness, you are guardians, you should know this. But there's also a good sense of good news in the vulnerability that institutions have, because then they allow development organizations that have been in the field for a long time to come in and impart the knowledge that they're learning over time. Yeah. So there goes my shot.
If I can add to that, what we found with the mentors that we were working with in our Tuwezeshe program was the width and depth of vulnerability of our young women everywhere, in every single country. The levels of abuse they had gone through, and it was a wide range of abuse. But in the UK, Scotland, and Wales, it was compounded by the fact that we're talking about Black girls, BMER girls, who were living in a mainly white society, and the way they didn't fit, and the way they were trying to manage the cultural conflict between their family dynamics, values, norms, and the norms of the mainstream society, and trying to manage that disconnect. A lot of the young women were finding very difficult. So we, like Akili Dada, have a psychosocial support, a counselor, a therapist. And again, depending on what the girls need, if the needs are more, we refer them on. But I think in terms of building young women leaders, activists, we've got to take into account the notion of self-care. Like I said, we are in it for the long haul, but you can't do it if you are dealing with issues within. So when we did our Tuwezeshe Akina Dada Young Women's Leadership Program, we actually started the program with what we call the theory of you. We start with the individual to see what is in you, make sure that you as an individual are have analyzed your life experiences, have come to terms with whatever you've faced, and are able then to take that out to become an activist and not to burn out. And it is still important today that anybody who is in this space of gender justice, fighting for gender justice, fighting for equality, whether it's a national union of students, whether it's an FGM activist, whether it's fighting for girls' education, whether it's campaigning on Clapham Common, whatever it is, Black Lives Matter, we need to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves emotionally. There's a phrase I heard in Uganda, which I think is extremely useful. You cannot pour from an empty cup. So you yourself have to be full in order to feed, mentor, support other women.
Thank you. That's such a universal message. I think self-care is, we forget what a radical act it can be to actually invest in yourself and look after yourself first and foremost. I think particularly when women are socialized to give so much of themselves away into other people and not kind of take a moment, step back and think, I need to be okay myself. And I think lots of us are probably feeling that at the moment with the kind of the additional pressure that kind of COVID puts on people to be everything for everyone. And that's a really important message. And thank you.
Audre Lorde, I would suggest.
Yeah.
Self-care is an act of political warfare.
Yes. Not that I want to be too political because I'm a neutral organisation, but I think with the things that have been happening over the last few months, I think, women need to be looking after themselves so that they can protect themselves and deliver for other women as well, in particular. We've only got a couple of minutes left, but I want to. It's gone quickly, hasn't it? I feel like I could do one of these every week. Just, I'm sure you both don't feel like it, but it's given me some energy this morning. There's been a couple of comments in the box, and I'm just going to pick up one, which is a very specific detail point and probably is for you, Sankara. It's talking about how whether mentors through your programs are paid or whether they're voluntary positions. What the women, do they participate voluntarily or are they paid or anything like that? I think that's useful to know from the perspective of some of the people who participate in organising programs and funding. And we're also, so go on.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So our mentors are not paid. They are not paid, they're voluntary. The only people we pay are the coaches. Yeah. So if we do feel that, a particular group of girls does require coaches, and we pay for that. Also, as a culture, as one of our cultures in the organization, every employee has access to a paid coach for them. So we take all our employees through coaches, and just like Adwoa said, you cannot pour from an empty cup. So we cannot be, putting you even in as much as you're a young professional in front of young women, yet, you either do not have, whether it's a self-care, whether it's the emotional intelligence, etc., etc. So we only pay coaches. We do not pay mentors. We don't pay mentors.
Thank you. That's useful to know. And then I'm going to pick up one more question. I'm just going to say, give you a minute each on it potentially. And it's a point about teachers. I think we've got Wendy who works on solar schools and supplying IT equipment to schools in Zambia. But they're becoming aware, I think, that the girls are less likely to access the equipment. And what's the role of the teacher in building confidence and encouraging girls? I know, Adwoa, you spoke quite specifically one point, I think, about the role of community in kind of wrapping around girls and it not just being that. So I wonder if you could expand on a bit of the role of the teacher.
I think that has to be linked in with stopping violence against girls in schools, because it's more than just lack of accessing the IT equipment. It's a lack of confidence. It's a lack of being safe to do so. It's being seen as, oh, that is something boys do. Girls do housecraft and sewing. Boys do engineering and techie things, which is the same issue even in the UK. But what you need to do is create a safe environment in the whole school that encourages everybody to see boys and girls as equal. So there can't be just a school prefect who's a male. And then you can have a girls senior prefect, because girls cannot be the prefect of the boys in the school. It's like changing that whole mindset around the school being a place for equality and a place where they can model gender justice. So yes, I mean, when they do get in touch, anybody get in touch with us at Forward, www.forwarduk.org.uk, or get in touch with SSAP, and you can get in touch with us. I mean, if you Google us, we're there. Though our internet is down. So Sankara, we are doing the Africa thing in the UK. Our internet is down.
That is very sad. That is very sad.
No, that is good.
But
that is good. It makes us realize how lucky we are.
Here in Africa. So I think to just add on to what Adwoa has said, I think something else that I have seen is whenever you see guardians or gatekeepers acting as a barrier to access, whether it's for these supplies or whether it is for education or even for anything else, even if it's extracurricular, that's always a red flag. Yeah, that's always a red flag. That is a school that does not really understand the essence of even say gender equality, let alone feminism, which could be a big concept that they refuse to understand, but then that's always a red flag. And my advice would be that you partner with an organization that caters to that area, then that organization would be able to facilitate that, because you may not be in a good position to really understand the nuances that come with that socio-cultural context. But then if you could work with an organization that is closer to that area, then that would easily make your work much, much easier. But then, for every guardian who's very happy to bring on board people who are going to impact girls and young women and even boys, in their institution, there's always going to be so many more who are happy to act as barriers for that. That's something that I have learned. But even, in the words of Eleanor Roosevelt, she said, it's better to light one candle than cast the darkness, ain't it? So I think you just decide where you're lighting your candles or which darkness you really care for. And slowly over time and incrementally, we end up lighting the whole world. Hopefully, it's taking a long time, but we'll do it one day. We'll do it.
Oh, I hope so. I've got confidence now this morning. I was feeling kind of, this is never going to happen. And you've both kind of really demonstrated that the actions we can take can make a difference. And that's really, really important. I think it's something we really need to hold on to sometimes when you feel like massive structures are just kind of wearing you down a bit. So thank you for kind of bringing that message to us today. I'm really excited as well, because I think there's lots of opportunity now for new partnerships to be formed, for moving the work forward in a really positive way. I'm getting lots of really lovely comments in the box as well, which I'll be sure to save and send on to you afterwards. It's so nice, isn't it, to hear nice things sometimes when sometimes you can feel kind of like, oh, am I good enough? Am I doing the right thing as a woman? Is what I'm achieving where it needs to be? So it's so good to have you all feedback positively to our panelists, so thank you. I'm just going to let you know that
quick question to Sankara Dada.
Yeah,
somebody's asking what Akili Dada means.
Oh, good question.
Akili is Swahili word for brains, and Dada is Swahili for sister or girl. So we are brainy girls, girls with brains. I hope I'm demonstrating nothing but that this morning, by the way.
You absolutely are. You are. I was so nervous coming onto this call, because I was like, these women are so amazing. I just feel, that imposter thing. You're like, oh, I don't know if I can do it. So I'm so pleased. Thank you so much.
We can all do it. We can all do it. We are all doing it. We need to support each other.
We must. And that's what I hope the Wales and Africa sector does and will do moving forward, as being a supportive partner, and that's the kind of culture we want to breed in what we do. Just to let everyone know, we've got a session at 11:30, which is Pressing for Progress, which is taking gender equality and social inclusion approach in health partnerships. I think that's really important. Adwoa, you were speaking earlier about FGM, about gynecological problems women have following Birth, particularly, I think it's particularly prevalent probably in rural communities, being able to access aftercare and things like that. So anyone who's interested in health, join that session. I hate finishing these sessions on a poll because it feels like admin and bureaucracy at the end of a real high, but I am going to ask my colleague to launch the poll just to let us know what you think about the session, if it was useful, and I hope we can recreate something like this in the future. And then Sankara's popped into the box as well. If you want to go far, go together. If you want to go fast, go alone. And that, I know, is we've got a colleague, Fadili, who works for SSAP, which you mentioned earlier, and that's one of his favourites as well, and how we should be participating in kind of dealing with these big social issues is together. I'm just going to give you all a couple of minutes just to rate the session. Please be honest as well. We won't be sharing these results at the end. They're internal for us to reflect on. We won't be using them to kind of make anyone feel bad. It's just to make us feel, just so that we know what we're doing in the future is useful and positive. I'm going to just give it a couple of minutes, and in the meantime, assume that poll is just going to be running in the background. And I'm just going to again say, Sankara and Adwoa, thank you so much for participating today. Thank you for filling the space for the third person who couldn't turn up today, but I don't think we ran out of stuff to talk about, and I think we can probably
we could have talked even more,
yeah. And thank you so much. And if anyone wants to get in touch with either of your organizations, please go to the website or get in touch with us. We're keen to make connections and build links that support women across the world. I'm just going to let that poll run for 1 or 2 more seconds.
And I just want to say thank you to everybody for listening and engaging and, welcoming Sankara and I. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully, yeah. I hope this bears fruit for you both as well. I'm excited to hear how well people have participated in the chat box. I'm going to close the poll in another 15 seconds, and then I'm going to do that awful thing where I just go end meeting and everyone just disappears into the ether, and it always feels very unnatural and weird, but that is what I'm going to do.
Have a lovely day, everyone.
A lovely day, everyone. Please participate in any of the sessions for the rest of the day, and I look forward to seeing more of you and working with more of you in the future. Bye bye.